Hi, welcome back. This video is part of a multi-part series in making cutouts from photos you might see during the actual school year. In this video, we'll be continuing on the cutout basics. Specifically, we'll be learning another method for making cutouts. So, the second option for making this cutout is using the pen tool. This method allows you to make a clean cutout with smooth edges. Since this photo is simple, we took advantage of Photoshop's algorithm to quickly make a decent cutout. But if we had a more complex photo with a basic background, or a subject whose colors are very similar to the background, or if we wanted to make a cutout of only a single person from a crowd, then it'd be way better to manually make a cutout with the pen tool, and not with a fast selection tool. The pen tool is a very versatile tool that lets you make clean, crisp cutouts. To make clean, crisp cutouts, you'll need to know some pen tool basics. So I'll list you some important pointers and some effective techniques to know. About the pointers, keep these things in mind. 1. Don't create an unnecessarily complicated path. You don't want to place 100 anchor points when you could have just placed 10. 2. Don't spend too much time on a detail people won't notice. You don't want to spend half an hour making a super perfect outline around every single tiny fold in someone's shirt, only to realize that those details aren't even that noticeable when zoomed out. And 3. Use curves in your path to make clean cutouts. You want to use curved paths and smooth points to better outline your subject. About techniques, use these when making your paths. 1. Place anchor points at important general areas. This sounds pretty vague, but you'll get this as you do more cutouts. By important general areas, I mean like the start and ends of someone's arm, or wherever there's curve transitions. 2. Add anchor points to existing line segments and move or adjust them to outline curves in your subject. Dipping your path like this allows you to easily make smooth outlines that contour your subject well. And 3. Adjust your path's curve handles and know when to make smooth points or cusp points. You want to fine-tune your path so you can have a good cutout. So, with all that said, let's make a cutout with the pen tool. Starting off, I'll just place an anchor point right here at the bottom right. I'll then make my next anchor points along any curve transitions. So that'd be right here because there's a cusp, and right here because there's another cusp. Make sure that for cusps, you convert your anchor points into cusp points so that you can have two individual curves that sharply transition from each other. So if you forgot, that's by holding Alt or Option, then clicking on that point. Moving on to the forearm, what we can do is place an anchor point along this curve right here, drag the cursor to make a smooth point, and in the middle of the resulting path, add an anchor point, hold Control or Command, and move it down to dip your path. This is going to outline the forearm pretty nicely. So moving on, we'll just place an anchor point right here at the center of the elbow. And we're going to drag it a little bit to make a curve. Something like that looks pretty good. I'll place my next anchor point along this curve. Drag it down a little bit so it can make this unique curve. I'm actually going to adjust the curve handle right here. I'm going to hold Alt or Option and move it down. Okay, so I'll just place another anchor point right here to contour along this forearm, and I'm going to adjust the curve handle. So it's something like that. It looks pretty good. Now we're on the fingers, and what you can do for the fingers is place anchor points by each end of the finger. So right here and right here. Then in the middle of your path, make an anchor point and dip the path upwards. And adjust your path if you have to. That's by holding Alt or Option, clicking on the point and dragging your cursor. And hold space if you want to move your point around. So somewhere like this looks pretty good. Same thing for the other fingers. Anchor point, center anchor point, dip, path, adjust. I'm going to move this anchor point a little bit. Anchor point, center anchor point, dip, path, adjust. Okay, so now we're on the shirt. And I want you guys to notice something. There's a lot of folds along the shirt, which we can see as a bunch of curve transitions. And how do we outline curvy transitions? By dipping our paths. So what you can do is just place an anchor point by the end of the side shirt, right here. And with the resulting line segment, fine-tune your path. To do that, add anchor points nearby the peak of each fold. So like right here, I'll add an anchor point and drag that point to that peak. And near the bottom of each fold, add an anchor point and drag it down. Also, adjust your anchor points if you have to. So hold Alt or Option and drag your points to fine-tune your path. So I'm just going to repeat that for every single fold. So peak, peak, bottom, peak, adjust, bottom, peak, bottom, peak, bottom, adjust, peak, bottom, peak, adjust, peak, bottom, peak, bottom, peak, bottom, and peak. So now I'll just get back to this region right here. So bottom, adjust, move it a little bit, peak, bottom, peak, bottom, adjust, and peak. So now we have a pretty decent outline. I'm just going to pan around it so you can see it. Okay, so that's a pretty decent outline. And as a side note, don't get too hung up if your path doesn't perfectly outline all the folds. As long as you get the general shape of the folds, your cutout will look great. So now we're on the face. And just like always, place anchor points by any curve transitions. So if you notice, there's kind of like a curve outward with the chin, and then inward with the lower cheek, and then back out of this upper cheek right here. So what I could do is place an anchor point by the upper cheek right here, drag my cursor to turn it into a smooth point, and add anchor points and dip the path outward and inward to accommodate for all those curves. Same thing up here, just place any points by wherever you see any curves. So if you notice, there's kind of like a little curve from the top of his hair to his cheek. It kind of looks like this. I'll draw it out. There's kind of a curve like that. So what you can do to make that kind of curve is place an anchor point up here, drag it out, and place an anchor point in the center of the path and dip it inwards. And just like that, you'll see that the path kind of mocks that shape that I drew. And you might want to fine tune it a little bit just by adding more anchor points and dipping it inwards. But I said this looks pretty good. So now we're on the hair. And for the hair, you just want to get a general outline. I'll show you a method later on how you can include all those individual hair strands. But for now, just get a general outline. Remember to place anchor points by all the curve transitions. So right here and here. Okay, now on the ear, and what you can do to easily outline the ear is just place a single anchor point, and with your resulting path, just dip your path. I think something like this is much more easier than having to place anchor points by each individual curve point. Alright, we're on the neck here, and what you can do is just place an anchor point here, and an anchor point here, and curve it just a little bit. And with this anchor point, you want to smooth it out a little bit. So hold Alt or Option, click on that point, and drag your cursor out. This will adjust both sides of the curve handles, and it's going to allow you to make a smoother path so it's not like super sharp and noticeable. Don't worry if you don't include all the parts of the neck. In your finalized cutout, people won't even notice that much. Alright, so now we're basically on the home stretch. All we have left to do is outline the entire left side of this guy's shirt. So what we can do is just place an anchor point at the bottom left here, and then just fine tune our path along every single curve. So first of all, I want to make sure that this point right here is a cusp point. So I'm going to turn it into a cusp point. Then I'll place my anchor point down here. And then I'll just dip my path inward or outward to contour along each curve in the subject. So I'm going to make an anchor point right here, drag it out to a shoulder, adjust it a little bit. I'm going to dip the path inward to contour to his shoulder again. I'm going to make a point right here, dip it outwards for the creases in your shirt, inward for the collar, outward, inward, outward, inward, adjust, adjust, inward, adjust, inward, adjust, adjust, inward, adjust, adjust, outward, inward, outward, inward, inward, outward. Alright, and just like that, we have the entire left side outlined pretty nicely. So all we have left to do is just connect the endpoints, make a selection, and turn that selection into a layer mask. So make sure you have your layer selected, and click on Add Layer Mask. And if you see, we have a pretty good, crisp, clean cutout. All we have left to do now is just add back the fine details from this guy's hair. To do that, click on any selection tool, like the Marquee tool, or Lasso tool, or Fast Selection tool, and in the top middle, click on Select and Mask. On the left side of your screen, click on the Refine Edge Brush tool. Then brush over where all the individual hairs would be. So that'd be like right along here. As you saw, Photoshop tried to add back those hair strands wherever I brushed over. So if I click on Show Original right here, you're going to see that it was originally super smooth and there wasn't any detail. But if I uncheck it, you'll see that Photoshop has added back those hair details. So what Photoshop did was use its color algorithm to unmask what it thought was part of the subject, which in this case is the hair. This is based on color. The more that the hair, or whatever fine detail you're brushing over, contrasts from the background, the better Photoshop will be able to accurately unmask the hair. So when you're done with that, just press OK. But I want you guys to notice something. If I add a colored background, like black, and I look back at the hair, you'll notice that there's some unwanted details. There's kind of like these weird gray fringes and like a weird gray haloing effect. So what we can do to fine tune the hair is kind of mask out those details. So we're going to use the brush tool and black to mask out those details. But before I even start, if I hold Alt or Option and click on the layer mask thumbnail, you'll see that the areas that had those unwanted details are gray. They're not perfectly white or perfectly black. So the best way to fine tune our hair is to only affect these gray areas. So to do that, change your brush mode to Overlay. And with the brush mode Overlay, you'll only be affecting those gray areas. It won't affect the solid whites or the solid blacks. So you'll notice that as I brush over these areas with my tool, it's only affecting those gray areas and not the solid whites. And I'll just undo that because I have one more thing to mention. On top of setting your brush mode to Overlay, you should also change the hardness of your brush. Hardness is how defined the edges of your brush is. A harder brush will be very defined, while a softer brush will be more blurry around the edges and slightly harder to notice. Since we want to softly mask out the excess hair details, it'd be better if we had a softer brush. So to do that, hold Alt then right click, or Option Command on a Mac, and drag your cursor up. You'll notice that the hardness percentage on the right there just changed. With a softer brush, you won't harshly adjust your layer mask. So now just brush over all those gray fringes and weird areas. If we go back to our cutout, you'll see that those unwanted details are now pretty much gone. I'll just fine tune it a little bit more. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And now I'd say we're finished. Congratulations, we just made a clean cutout with nice smooth edges and fine detail in the hair. Don't worry if you don't get everything immediately. You'll need some practice and some experience before you can easily make good cutouts. If you practice the pen tool basics and techniques I mentioned before, I guarantee that you'll be great with Photoshop.